I don't have no rapper friends, I hang with the vultures.
Nigga, we having the best divorce ever. If we go to court, we'll go to court together.
Did it with integrity. These boys try to hate on me, just wait and see. More blood be spilling, it's just pain to me. Dangerously, ain't no changing me, ain't no shaming me.
Atlanta nigga, live like Ted Turner type shit. On camera, bruh, knocking jaws loose type shit.
Niggas so thirsty to put me in beef. Dissecting my words and start looking too deep. I look at the tweets and start sucking my teeth. I'm letting it rock cause I love the mystique.
I got friends, I got foes, but they all sitting ducks. Hit his turf and get cracking, double back like a deluxe.
You try and rob me and it's gon' feel like you sitting at your favorite restaurant. Cause nigga, that's where you dine at. Hold up, hold my bulletproof vest. When we survive, know that we blessed.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Warning. The Federal Communications Commission has determined the following content to be emotionally harmful. Snowflakes should not view this content under any circumstances, even if supervised by a G.I. Joe, Navy SEALs, Army vet, or someone with good common sense. The views and opinions expressed, including the depictions of persons of color, corrupt politicians, white people with or without a tan, haters, who have yet to brush their teeth typing angrily in the comment section with hot breath syndrome, do not reflect any official policy or position of the U.S. government. This program contains graphic language, dark comedy, unique intelligence, creativity, a high credit score, and high blood pressure when triggered. This program has also been accused of racism, violence, misogyny, mansogyny, feminism, MGTOWism, defacement of celebrities, and of course, being a bully. Welcome to Thought Crimes.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to Thought Crimes. This is your girl Sincere, and I'm here with.
Yo, what's up, everybody? This is your man P Solo Prince Solomon in the building today, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna be having some fun here, right? Doing some hip hop.
And before we get into our main subject of the Punisher, Big Pun, I just want to give a shout out to Souls of Mischiefs. It's a legendary classic song, 93 Till Infinity. Everybody already knows about that song. It finally went platinum. So shout out to them for their achievements. Yeah. And then also, Salt and Pepper. They will be inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So shout out to them as well.
I think they'll be inducted the same time as Outkast. So I think that's going to be dope. You know, Salt and Pepper, listen, laid down the blueprint. Salt and Pepper, Spinderella, laid down the blueprint, ladies and gentlemen. So a lot of times they do not get their credit that they deserve. But I always just thought even down to their fashion attire has influenced a lot of people.
Man, yeah, I think Salt and Pepper are just as important as Run DMC.
There you go, right then and there. So, you know, yeah, shouts out to that and the whole landscape of the art form of hip-hop, you know, too, by the way. So I think that's going to be, you know, an incredible sight to see. I know for everybody that's a little bit pessimistic in modern times and in contemporary times, you know, it's always easy to just kind of point out the negativity. You get what I'm saying? So, you know, I think, you know, historically, hip-hop for the most part has presented the world with some of the most diverse, no DEI, right? The diverse, right? Most introspective, most ambidextrous art that we have seen. And the idea that it's just it's genre bending in itself. I know that the term genre in itself does historically have a negative racist connotation because of isolation and Jim Crowism and all this other stuff that went on in the past concerning the music industry and entertainment too. But in itself, when you really break down what like hip hop is at its best, it's an amalgamation of different elements.
I agree. And look, and this is why we're getting into the subject of Big Pun, talking about the legacy of Capital Punishment. It was his debut album, and it really caught the hearts and the minds of a lot of people in hip hop, you know, being a Latin Hispanic MC. And at the time, a lot of Hispanic and Latino MCs weren't really recognized. Number one, because as you saw with Spike Lee, how he showcased it truthfully, and his film, his early work about the relationship between the Hispanic community and the Black community.
Do the right thing.
Do the right thing. Yeah. There was some tension there. So even though Hispanics were one of the early groups to really get on hip hop and enjoy it, it still was tension there because a lot of them was not really feeling the music or respecting the music as they should at the time. But eventually it caught on in their community. And Big Pun was really important. Even when you're talking about Vinny, shout out to Vinny. Vinny talked about 27 years ago from today, Big Pun released one of the greatest debut LPs of all time, Capital Punishment, on Loud, RCA, and Terror Squad. The first solo Latin hip-hop artist to go platinum, nominated for Best Rap Album at the 1999 Grammy Awards. Pun was the greatest MC I had heard since G-Rap. And this is, again, coming from Vinny. This is his opinion on X. He's called Pack Pistol Pazzy.
Okay. Well, okay, listen. All right. So I do want to get into that whole conversation because number one, too, the idea of we bring up Wu-Tang, we bring up MF Doom, but also, Capital Punishment was also, in his lyricism that he had, he was also dragging in the moniker from the Marvel comics of the Punisher too, right? So, with that being said, one of the reasons why I personally felt like, the Punisher or Capital Pun or Capital Punishment, it is a classic album. Number one, hands down, it's a classic debut. I definitely rank it, in that pantheon of classic hip hop debuts. But also just the way it's just an onslaught of bars. Like Pun's rhyming style for 1998, I believe the album was released in 1998, okay? And it was an onslaught of rhymes after rhymes and bars on top of bars and punchline. It was kind of like basically what Rakim had developed early on and what he pioneered, along with Daddy Kane. I think Daddy Kane, to me, he was more of a punchline rapper, which is why during the whole battle, he was like leaning more towards Cole, because Cole leans more heavily on punchlines and at times his flows, but Pun was taking a lot of that energy and then, borrowing some of the storytelling from the likes of Cool G Rap, like you mentioned, Sin, but also Biggie Smalls as well, who by then had already passed. And then Pun was able to put it together in his own gumbo of the Capital Punishment album. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think the album is about, let me check real quick. If you subtract the skits, packing a mac and a mac and a mac, it's 24 tracks, and he stays consistent for 24 tracks.
Well, what's interesting, I wanted to say, even though it's categorized as East Coast hip hop,
right?
What was really interesting about Capital Punishment is there was a lot of influence from the West Coast on that album.
Yeah. I can see that with the Twins joint.
Yeah, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. So there was a lot, the G-Funk era. So the G-Funk era influenced a lot of East Coast rap as well. Now I know he's doing his own, East Coast mafioso type of talk, Italian spaghetti, also the Latin gangs and different things like that. But he was also influenced by the West Coast scene with G-Funk, and you could really hear it in this the Punisher album, Capital Punishment from Big Pun, because he was basically going off of the moniker of the Punisher. From Marvel's comic books. So he was also into comic books as well, which you see that a lot in hip-hop. Run DMC, you see that with MF Doom. A lot of hip-hop fans love comic books. So you just saw a lot of different influences within this album.
Yeah, even when you bring up like G-Funk, like for the joint Twins, you'll see that. But even though this joint was really on Loud Records, which there's a real history between Loud Records and how it ended up collapsing in on itself. But I think what's interesting to me about this album is that there's a bevy of diverse guests, like even lyrically. Of course, you got Noriega Wyclef. I think Wyclef held his own, which is something that Wyclef always bragged about, that I was able to rhyme back and forth with Big Pun. You know, nobody can get me. I rhymed with Big Pun. He even did it when he was going after Cannabis, you know, because they had a falling out. But, you know, you also, of course, you have Fat Joe. Cuban Link was getting busy on this album. Like I think people like lyrically have always slept on Cuban Link. I think he's a dope MC as far as how he's able to do his word plays, not only flows but punchlines. And him and Pun had a lot of wit. I always thought like Pun had very funny bars in a different way.
Yeah, that's a missed opportunity for Terror Squad at the time because, like you said, Cuban Link, he was a really, really good MC, I would say.
Yeah.
They had a lot to work with over there.
No, you did. You're right about that. Even though Fat Joe didn't write anything. Now, Fat Joe at the very least, he was charismatic as a performer. Because I do have
as the hype man at the time.
Yeah, I have a category for performing rappers, like guys that people are writing their stuff, but they put on a good show for people. So, you know, I put him in there with the whole, you know, Diddy thing and everything, all that type of stuff. But, you know, to this point, though, Sin, my favorite tracks off this joint is definitely number 2, Beware. I think it's a very, even though he has an intro with different clips and everything, Sin, but I think Beware is it's like a very ominous announcement that a new lyricist is in town.
Yo, you know, when I hear this album, some of the things that come to my mind is source material is like Sin City. I also think of course, the Punisher comic books. I think of Wanted as well, the graphic novel. Big Pun with this album had a real strong graphic novel appeal to it. You know, even when it's talking about the life of crime or even sexual desires, you know, like I said, the track Player, also, of course, featuring Joe, who's an incredible singer. But the whole entire album it had a nice flow, and it didn't feel like it made it felt easy, like it didn't take a lot of effort to put such a great project together. That, you know, when you listen to the album, it's just a nice flow to it.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, I don't disagree with you on that one. I think Big Pun, he showed out on the track that I think my personal opinion, I think he left Black Thought I think he left him in the dust on track 3 with Super Lyrical. Although I think Black Thought did his own thing, but Pun, there's not really, I don't think on this album, there's no one that really outshines Pun on this album. You know, it is his album. Yeah. Well, no. Historically, it's not even just about it being his album, because we've had people in the past that it was their album, but they've been outshined. Like AZ, you know, with Illmatic, they outshined them on the album. So, you know, that's why I'm saying just how strong his lyricism is that. Listen, I mean, he was a very commanding MC.
No, the reason why I'm bringing that up is some MCs are secure enough. And, you know, the people in the background who worked on this project, they'll let us know whatever the truths are, right? But you know this. Some people are confident where they like, you know, AZ stays on Illmatic, right? But you know that some people, when they do their project, if somebody outshines them, they'll either rewrite their stuff and come back harder, or, you know, the person won't be on the album. You know, I'm just saying, you know.
Well, that's when you start getting into that Jay-Z Cameron era shit. Right. You know, that's to me that takes away the sport. Even that you mentioned that.
Right.
Pun was very competitive as a lyricist. He actually wanted to cut a track with Eminem by that time. And remember, I believe this joint dropped in 98. Probably, like, you know, people got to know a lot about 99, but 98 it dropped. Eminem show, not the Eminem show, I think, is it the Marshall? Yeah, the Eminem show, I think, drops a little bit later, some years later. But
wait, are you talking about the Marshall Mathers LP?
The Marshall Mathers LP.
Yeah, the Marshall Mathers
LP. Then that
LP.
would drop in what 2000 and what? 2000 or 2001? Somebody will correct us in the comments.
Let me see.
Yeah, well, you can pull it up right now, actually. Good job, love. But Pun was very competitive. But since you brought up rewriting, you know, on the track John Blaze, Nas had to go rewrite his verse when he heard Pun's verse.
I believe it.
Yeah, and Pun said that was an achievement because one of his favorite MCs was Nas. And he said the fact that he had to go rewrite his verse, he said that was like, that's a notch under your belt.
Okay, the Slim Shady LP was the one that dropped in 1999.
What was the Marshall Mathers came later?
Marshall Mathers came out in 2000.
Okay, yeah. So I was about right. 2000, and then he did his thing a little bit later with the Eminem show. But
around 2002, right?
Remy Ma said that Pun wanted to destroy Eminem on the record. He said he wanted to get in the booth so he can destroy him on the record.
Well,
that would have been nice.
By how
just to see what happened.
Pun presented himself, to your point, I don't think he would ever leave somebody off. I think he would just go back, if anything, and just try to outshine the other person. Another people that, since you brought up Eminem, I remember Busta Rhymes talked about they kept rewriting their verses to outshine each other, and then eventually, I think Busta said eventually he said enough. Okay,
that's enough. We got to put this shit out.
We're going with the final cut, But to get back to, of course, what you're saying. But look, Black Thought, there's not many. You can't think of too many MCs that could just outshine Black Thought. Like, for example, when we saw on the BET Cypher, we had Mos Def, we had Black Thought, we had Eminem.
Right.
I still think Black Thought had the best.
One.
He was number one, and I say Eminem was number two.
Right.
With both, of course, standout moments. And this is not also the undercut Mos Def, because I know he is.
Sean, come on.
He's great. No, he's great MC, and he put great music together.
Yeah, Black on Both Sides is a classic.
Right, but the BET Cypher, it was really a battle between Eminem and Black Thought, and Black Thought stole the show. And while we're talking about this, just to bring up your point that you're mentioning with Capital Punishment, Big Pun out-rapped everybody on this album.
Yeah, that's all. I'm just saying, to the energy that he had, and I think then I always wonder what Eminem and Big Pun would have sounded like on a track together, because around that time, because when Sin and I talk about Eminem, some people get it confused when we're talking about Marshall. When we talk about discography, we're talking about album, the body of artwork, and the consistency of album to album to album to album, right? Like they say, per capita, right? Well, we're talking about that. We're talking about, but I always me and Sin had these conversations. When I'm talking about people putting words together, that's a different list. That list starts to look a little different. And I think Eminem is very high on that list, but we're talking about, I had made a post recently. We just did a post recently. I said in 2000, if you want to say 98 to 2000, you put M and Pun on a track together, who do you feel at that time is going to out rap each other? I think it would have been very interesting. I think Black Thought, and to the thing that you're saying that I do like that you brought up with the point with, Busta Rhymes, I do miss that type of competitiveness,
like when we saw Cannabis, DMX, all them at a table, Pun.
Swords sharpening swords.
Yeah, no, look, it's a competitive sport. If you talk about lyricism, and when you're talking about this album, you see the competitive nature of rap music and hip hop, and going back to what you said about super lyrical, that's the point. Look at that. I mean, look at it. Right off the bat,
you can't beat them.
They letting you know what it is.
You can't win. Yeah, that was a fire track, though. That was a fire track.
And also, I miss back then how they were, back then in the 90s and early 2000s, people loved skits on their albums.
Oh yeah,
That was a big, big deal.
I ain't gonna lie, though. Even though it was still funny, I do always skip over the sex skit. But the... No, on this album, because Biggie had them, too. A lot of people had sex skits.
Yeah, they did.
Lil' Kim had them. Right?
Yeah, they all had the sex
I actually thought the Lil' Kim and Biggie sex skit was very funny. That one was funny. But the packing the Mac, that one with on Pun and on part 1 and 2, that one was funny. Like when the guy said, "How come I ain't shoot your fat ass?" when he had the skit where he had to shoot a Thomas. That was really funny to me.
Well, Big Pun was always trying to make a connection between Puerto Ricans and black people.
Yes.
Even when you have the track for number 12, the Caribbean Connection.
Yes.
Featuring Wyclef.
Yeah. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Pun was always wanting to talk about how the diversity within the Caribbean, and how they should all stay connected, remember their roots. But, and that's funny because at the time, And I know the FBA people, they're gonna speak on this and stuff too. But at the time, everybody know there was moments in hip hop where people were trying to do like the "We Are the World." Yeah. So you had Pan Africanism, or you will have the Caribbean connection,
the percenters.
Yeah, like in New York, because it's the culture of New York.
It's diverse.
There'll be like the 5%ers, and there'll be like Hebrew Israelites in New York. They'll be like they're tribes of the real Israelite Jews. Puerto Ricans, Black, they'll name the list.
The Dalai Lama,
right? They'll name the list of it and all that. So, and in New York hip hop, the reason why there was a moment where it dominated so much is, those interesting conversations will be had all the time, in New York City, and of course, even though the foundations of hip hop does come from the South. I know people don't want to admit it, but I'm sorry,
Rest in peace, Angie Stone.
Angie Stone, James Brown. We all know it. The origin point. A lot of it comes from the South.
Come on now, Sid, son, for real. I'm on subscribing from you. I'm tired now.
But you had a lot of immigrants that did come through from New York. Mm-hmm. And that had a lot of love for the culture that Black Americans created.
Look at Elon Musk. All right, Sid, I'm gonna let you go. I'm joking. Let me be serious here.
You had a lot of Jamaicans come in. And,
right.
Herc. You talk about a lot of even people from the UK. Like when you talk about Slick Rick, talked about he learned his style and flavor from a lot of Black Americans, and then he added his own twist to it. And then even if you talk about the Puerto Ricans, like Big Pun.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because even on some of these tracks, and it's crazy because I think that's why, even for you and I personally, the whole Fat Joe Diaspora Wars thing was a bit confusing, because we remember hearing what Pun was talking about on his records.
Yeah, Pun said that Black people ingratiated him, allowed him to come into the culture that they already set up. Fat Joe, he spins it in a different way. Fat Joe would say,
Joe, what's going on?
Black people and Puerto Ricans both created hip hop from the beginning. No. That's not true. Black people created the hip hop, and then we had it's like what I say about jazz. You got Cuban jazz, you got even the jazz in Japan that's very beautiful. I like a lot of the different subgenres of jazz that have
different
come from
iterations of it,
different cultures. But the origin of jazz, Black Americans created jazz, right?
Yeah,
so it's the same thing. Yeah, you could have people who've added to hip hop, but the foundation of hip hop is Black Americans.
Yeah, because when you bring up jazz, you have to bring up New Orleans. You have to bring up Harlem, and we're talking about Harlem before you even have your immigration boom in Harlem too. By the way, that's a real conversation where they were going around asking Black Harlemites, how do you feel about the different iterations of Spanish groups coming in, right? And we do talk about going back to the 1920s, but that's another conversation. But I do find it interesting that Pun's message on capital punishment is, of course, counter narrative to what some of the stuff Joe and even to some degree what Busta Rhymes was saying. But even if you go back to the tracks, and the reason why I'm bringing it up, and Sin did a great job bringing that up as well, because if you go back to the track number 7, Dream Shatterer, he's talking about like blacks and Puerto Ricans need to own their own piece within hip hop, and all these white distributors, they being disrespectful to the culture, like all of this stuff that a lot of people are still complaining about today, back then was still being talked about. And even on Capital Punishment, I even think on the Capital Punishment album, I don't think, a lot of times people have pulled away the message Homeboy was spitting too all over these tracks, because he kept bringing that up routinely on different tracks, even on the Glamour Life.
Yeah, Big Pun loss was a big loss for the Latin community, because he was one of the only, and probably still to this day, he was one of the only Latin MCs that the Black community didn't have any issues with. Number one, he was able to show his love for his Puerto Rican culture and Puerto Rican heritage, and intertwine that with his love of Black music and hip hop effortlessly, and this is why he was a trailblazer for his community. You don't have a lot of Latin artists that can really do that and not have no type of backlash at all from the Black community. Like Big Pun was able to go into those waters without any issues, which is why he's a major loss. Because sometimes, you'll get into, a Latin artist that have, who may love hip hop, but they have issues with the black community. So with Big Pun, you didn't have those issues.
I agree with you.
He
on
was
that
able
one.
to go into black spaces and nobody cared.
No, that's the thing about it too, and that also that further creates regional divides, right? So then you have some people, they're like, from other regions, they're like, well, I don't want to be bothered with quote unquote New York standards if you got like situations like, stuff that Joe is saying, or weird conversations with like China Mac, or whatever the case is. It just don't feel a cohesiveness of what it, means to have a black culture. We're not talking about monoliths, but we're talking about.
Oh, thank you. Excuse me.
We're talking about having. Yeah, we're talking about having just a cohesive understanding of what the narrative is when we're talking about James Brown, Solomon Burke. We're talking about Etta James, Sarah Vaughan, Dana Waters. When we're talking about like black artists, and I think sometimes when people get too tight or they lose the point when we're saying in the process, why are you trying to erase black American creators of different forms of music? And it's that simple. I don't really get into the arguments. I don't, play the game of like, the devil's, what is it? What did they call it? The devil's talking point or whatever the case
devil's
is.
Advocate.
Yeah, I don't do that because I think a lot of times people are being malicious.
I don't think devil's advocate.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the trolling, but I'm talking about, when people do devil's advocate in the sense like devil's advocate, black people didn't really create anything in American society. You get what I'm saying?
That's not a good devil's advocate, though.
Yeah, but that's the point that I'm saying online that you see usually is taken. And even going back to, when we're speaking about Capital Pun or Big Pun's message that has been on this album that typically a lot of people have missed, it is interesting to see like, where his homeboy Fat Joe is with the poor explanation of how he views the history of hip hop, even though you have people that are his peers. And in some cases, some of Joe's seniors have came out to correct him about black people's iteration, creation, and contribution to hip hop. But they also respect when other folks do come in when they start bringing their own twist on it. That's the whole point of cultural diffusion.
Yeah, with cultural diffusion, you got to be honest about things. Like, if I go to a Japanese restaurant and I'm respecting, the Japanese people who are working there and everything, I'm not going to go in there and just because I may add something new right there in the moment and I think about it and I'm able to have a successful restaurant after that, I'm not going to say I created the sushi. That's from the
sushi.
Sushi. That's from Japanese people, right? So you do have that situation where you'll have people come into hip hop and say they created the origin point of
like
it,
all of it,
and that's not true
they
at all.
ate all of it, Sid.
Like, or they'll come in and be like co-creators, and that's not true either. So Big Pun out of his own mouth came with respect, as he said. The black community welcomed him, and the black community is very welcoming. It's just that we don't want somebody coming in like a vampire and then saying they created something that they know they didn't create. Like, stop it.
That's when people start looking like Tekashi.
Like, even South Koreans are honest about, for example, fried chicken.
Yeah.
They said the black people from the military showed them how to create
fried chicken.
And they said, and they just said they added their own little twist to it.
That's okay.
And that's okay.
That's all right, But also, like I said, this album, to the point that we're speaking on, saying, people understate that on the track "The Rain and the Sun," it's an interlude, but it's actually one of my favorite tracks on here. It's Big Pun and Dead Prez, and Dead Prez also, if I recall correctly, they were label mates with Pun. But it was interesting how Dead Prez was able to move around. Jay-Z wanted to jump on the remix to Hell Yeah, and Pun respected them. Also, Pun did have a diversity in his palette of what he liked, even though he rapped with more aggression and at times violence as an element. If you go look at and listen to like who did Pun revere, Mos Def, Cannabis, a lot of guys that Nas, like he was really into a lot of the guys that were just primarily about lyricism, and then he put his own little gangster spin on shit.
Yeah, I mean, people forget, like, people don't listen to music with tunnel vision in one space. You know, a lot of people respected conscious rappers. A lot of people like the gangster rap stuff. You know, you don't have to be in one space, and that's also the problem, you know. You know, I didn't even like at the time what happened to De La Soul when out of nowhere there was a backlash against them. Again, not with Big Pun, but with some people in hip hop, and it's like, everybody can breathe, everybody can live. You know, you don't have to, you know, go after somebody else's style unless it's like something that's like anti-black and weird, you know.
But that's probably gonna stay. Let's be real, Sin. You know how this thing goes.
You know,
that's probably gonna stay.
You know, yeah, but it's like some people was even like going at the backpack rap, you know, is later iterations and stuff like that. And it's like, no, it's okay for everybody to have their own space and to have their own lane. You know, we don't want everybody wearing the same size shoes.
That's boring.
That would be very boring.
That's why a lot of some stuff has become a bit flat, because somebody does something and then they hop on it. And, you know, they did it with De La Soul Sin, but you also remember they did it with Speech and Arrested Development. You know, out of nowhere, they started getting this huge hateful backlash, almost to a point where they was working their way off of radio at times.
And, you know, to your point, you know, about the respect also that Big Pun, you know, really showed, going back to Super Lyrical, they did use some sampling of the Notorious B.I.G.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of love from the production standpoint as well, with everybody who worked on that project. You know, Big Pun was also a producer of that. You had Fat Joe, of course. You had also Rock Wilder.
Rock Wilder is an understated producer.
Talk about it.
Yeah, Rock Wilder is an understated producer, but go ahead.
Young Lord. So you had a lot of people who was a part of it, and you had a lot of different elements that's important to hip hop. You know, even when you're talking about some sampling from Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yes.
You know, this is something that, you know, Dewan B talks about a lot when it's sampling. You know, you have a lot of people who will sample from jazz artists, from
everywhere.
Funk artists, from blues, you know, everywhere when it comes to hip hop. You know, sampling is actually a really important part in hip hop music and hip hop culture.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's times of it, like, I don't like necessarily bad samples. It actually, it's annoying to me, but I also know that some people, especially, you know, in our TikTok culture that we're in, I think sometimes people do sampling as a cheat code of using a steroid of nostalgia to make people automatically engage with the record. So, like, when Erica Banks, I think she did the Nelly sample, or her producer did the Nelly sample, it just wasn't really a good song to me. But then when you saw, like, you know, the Luther sample with SZA and Kendrick, or what we've seen with OVO 40 has done on If You're Reading This Is Too Late with
those
the genuine samples.
Yeah,
it's, you know, right.
And then also you said, like, sampling of Luther with Scissors and Kendrick. Look, you got certain producers who just know how to sample. And
they know how to do it right.
You know, Soundwave, DJ Mustard.
Yeah.
You know, if you're talking about Metro Boomin.
People sleep on his sampling skills.
There are just certain people who know how to sample things really well, and there's other people where it's just choppy.
Yeah,
and it just doesn't gel well.
It doesn't do anything. And also on Squabble Up, I thought the sample on there was fire.
Oh yeah, that was good. But, you know, going back to Big Pun, when we're talking about Capital Punishment, he was able, you know, the producers, they were able to sample both Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah,
you
they
know,
did a
again,
variation of styles. Yeah,
trying to showcase the love, because I remember after Tupac and Biggie died, you know, a lot of people were trying to
figure out where to go.
Well, they was trying to show unity. Like, yo, we all do hip hop. You know, we're gonna sample some West Coast. We're gonna sample some legends from the East Coast, and then, you know, eventually the South, you know, and also the Midwest and other regions in hip hop that was at one time being ignored. You know, they also started to get the respect that they deserved as well. So it's really nice, you know, seeing, you know, after the death of Tupac and Biggie, people trying to figure out how to get to a space of harmony while still being competitive, you know, which is very important. Look, people should not die over competition. People shouldn't be so emotional over competition. Competition, whether you are the winner or the loser, there should be mutual respect. And I think hip hop was trying to get back into that after the death of Tupac and Biggie.
Yeah, and I always feel like this: if that's what you are, then you're not a competitor. You're a cheater. You're just a tyrant. So if you like winning and you're comfortable stunting and putting your pinky ring in everybody's face and everybody low class and all this other stuff, but it happens the other way around. You kind of want to make some things move, and that's actually where the street element, basically rearranged the game for the wrong things. Of course, after Biggie and Tupac, Kirk Franklin was able to sprout up because a lot of I want to go get saved, right? That's what a lot of people went to go do, but hip hop still existed after them, and so people was trying to figure out what directions they wanted to go into. And I did see, you can kind of see that people was leaning more so into heavier, dense lyricism. More robust rhymes. You had Mace do what he did. Cam started to pop up. In the South, of course, you had Outkast, and, they were very artistic, but they had, dense lyricism that just putting over these gumbo beats. You had a lot of people, they wanted to lean in more to showing the creativity of their pen game. And I think, Big Pun was definitely, one of the apex lyricists of the later 90s going into, of course, the 2000s. And I think, that sets off a trend of, hyper competitive lyrical MCs, which later kind of defaults back into, some gangster rap and more simple, snappy beats that we seen coming, towards, when we get into the 2000s. You know what I'm saying? So I think what Pun was able to lay down in that regard, and we give it to Fat Joe about, the direction where he wanted to go with everything too, because stylistically Fat Joe was very much so influenced by Diddy and what went on with Diddy and Biggie Smalls as well. But Pun was telling these grand narrative tales too. And also saying, for Capital Punishment as a debut record, debut album for a hip hop artist, it's very dense. And I think that also is by and large having to do moving past Biggie Smalls' last official studio album at the time of his death, which was Life After Death. And you saw a lot of lyricists and artists want to be very cinematic and ambitious. And one of the things I like about Capital Punishment, like I love about Illmatic or even Life After Death, this is a very cinematic album. It's very cinematic, very descriptive, narrative, journalistic type tales that, he's got his wit and humor. He's just going in and out of these flows. It's just crazy.
It was like having a movie being played in your ear.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I kind of miss a lot of that at times.
Yeah, I miss that too.
I miss too, like the close your eyes and imagine a world.
And on that note, everyone, we want to know what you think about Capital Punishment, the legacy of this album, about Big Pun, and also, even if you want to share your opinions about, the where it stands now between the Latin community and Black community in hip hop, and your thoughts on that as well.
Oh yeah. Also, I do want to say one other thing, Sin. This last part here. Remember, Pun doesn't live to get to the second album. So the record labels kind of like mismanaged how they was going to handle that artistic direction, and we did see that. Yeah, we did see that a couple times. Like the second joint, the downside of this type of era is that the record labels literally can dictate the artistic direction of someone's album, even if the artist said, I don't want my album to go in this way. But in this case, Big Pun had passed away by then. So leave your comments below, ladies and gentlemen. If you've listened to this album before, or if you were older at this time, what are some of your favorite tracks? Where do you feel Big Pun ranks in the pantheon of lyricists, or at the very least, where does this rank with debut albums from a hip hop artist? And also, question, in 2000, if 2000 Eminem and Big Pun get on a track together, who do you all feel is having the better verse? I'm your man, P Solo.
And this is your girl, Sincere.
Peace.
I got some problem. I got some problem. I got some problem. Yeah. I got some problems. I got some problems. I got some problems. Yeah. I got some problems. I got some problems. I got some problems. Yeah. Goddesses be taking me hostage on odysseys. Pardon me, I got a little bit plastic, faster than normal. Call it a ting. Hopefully this nigga will warn you. First let me warn you. I got a problem with ignorance. Tis why I'll burn the bridge or just swim. If it's me versus them, it's gonna be them. Cause I've learned enough to know how to win. Pride high as the tide rise, trying to reach Pacific Rim. What lies beneath the lines then is a devil that lurks in sheepskin, who show more teeth than a wolf grin. Still got cold feet or you gon' dive in. Life's a movie, drive in. Drop top, let's begin. It could be me and you, or me, you and your friends. Now we up in the Ritz. Started off at the day's end. Steak, cheese, eggs, and grits. Something like for Tuesday, slim black sweats with some gray Timbs. Raider hoodie, Marshawn Lynch. Y'all done alienated the alienation. And if it's war of the worlds, call me Vader Zim. Y'all done alienated the alienation. And if it's the war of the worlds, call me Vader Zim. Cause goddesses be taking me hostage on odysseys. Pardon me, I got a little bit plastic, faster than normal. Call it a tick, hopefully this liquor will warm you. First let me warn you, I got a problem with ignorance. I got a problem with ignorance. I got a problem with ignorance. I got a problem with niggas sis. I got a problem with all of that comedy that swans us. Like we all just content, be a nigga rich. Motherfuck you with kinda, ain't no fictional construct enough to uplift my physical conduct. When it still ain't fixed, I did it one up and flip. My nigga, I got a problem. Yeah. I got a problem, yeah. I got some problem, yeah. I got a problem, yeah. On odysseys, pardon me, I got a little bit plastic, faster than normal. Call it a tick, hopefully this liquor will warm you. First let me warn you, I got a problem with ignorance. I got a problem with ignorance. I got a problem with ignorance. I got a problem with niggas sis. I got a problem with all of that comedy that swans us. Like we all just content, be a nigga rich. Motherfuck you with kinda, ain't no fictional construct enough to uplift my physical conduct. When it still ain't fixed, I did it one up and flip. My nigga, I got a problem, yeah. I got a problem, yeah. I got some problem, yeah. I got a problem, yeah.
To this day, to this day.
Turn your back on me. Is that a challenge?
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
White folks are nosy. They have specials. Nosy specials. Why does a bee make honey? You ain't a bee. Why do you give a fuck?
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
If he dies, he dies.
to our Patreon for more. And don't bother me.